Okay, let's see how this video goes. Hello, what is good? Welcome back to my bookshelf. Today, I thought of this topic. I think of this topic a lot, but I wanted to talk about it actually, and it's what will future historians think about fiction that we write? And I don't mean like human historians, because I'm pretty sure they would know what we're talking about, but if aliens did exist, this gets really like hypothetical, but if aliens did exist and we got wiped out, seems very real right now, and some super smart aliens came in and tried to piece together what happened to us, would they see Fahrenheit 451 as something that happened, something that we as a society actually did, and it's a historical account, you know? All the time. I think of that all the time when I'm writing, because like, where is it? There it is. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Tons of people Googled if she was real or not, and that's the same with the other book by that author. What is it? Daisy Jones and the Six. They're all there somewhere. People have to I had to Google if these people were actually real, because it feels so real, but you know, who knows? It's obviously not, because we know, but if these aliens, extraterrestrial beings, didn't have these resources to look up and make sure these people were real, they sound kind of real. And I also think about this when I'm on YouTube at like 3 in the morning, because there's some pretty weird stuff on there. So always in those sort of videos in the comments, like, what if this was the last thing that humanity, like, that this was the only clue that humanity had ever existed? It's just like, well, that wouldn't be too good. So that's what I think about when I am writing or watching weird videos on YouTube. Like, if extraterrestrial beings came down and saw the stuff that we made that they would think is factual, because I don't know, maybe they don't have fiction. They would think, dang, this planet's messed up. How did all these societies run at the same time, or in different timelines all the time, and like how they have dragons, and like how did they have dystopias, and like no wonder they destroyed themselves, you know? But who knows? My main project, Project What, or Violet, is set in a hypothetical future in like post-nuclear war. Obviously that feels very real right now, and that's not fun, but the book also uses a lot of world history in it to like tie things in, like, you know, history always repeats itself or whatever, you know? So would it confuse future researchers on what happened 2040, the year 2040 and onwards? Because that's when my book starts its own lore. Because everything leading up to 2040 is accurate to our timeline right now, our actual real life timeline. And after that is the war that I make up, the nuclear war, the building of the island they currently live on, and everything that happens in the book, actually. So everything starts happening after 2040. Obviously we're not there yet, so I don't know what's gonna happen, but will that trip up some people, extraterrestrial beings, aliens, that are trying to piece together what happened to humanity? And that goes back to historical fiction, like The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo or The Book Thief. I love historical fiction, but I feel like those are a little more minor, because it sort of gives an account of a specific life in those times. So it's kind of like if, like, the New York Times published an article on a survivor of like a certain thing. That's what it sounds like, except it's in book form. So I don't think that one's super substantial as like some other things I'm going to talk about, but that brings into a different thing, like just like little things that will be noted probably by this extraterrestrial thing, because it's a written account, and I'm assuming this species, this society of aliens, doesn't get how humans can make up stories. That's what I'm assuming here. Or they do make up stories, but they don't understand that humans can do that too. So they think everything is fact. I should have made that disclaimer sooner, but it's out there now. So the other extreme that I had in this, because like historical fiction is just like a one-off account of something that actually happened, so that doesn't really mess with our timeline too much. But the other side of things that would really mess up our humanity's reputation in the eyes of these aliens is fantasy and sci-fi novels. Like J.R.R. Tolkien, he made up all of those little fantasy characters, and they're set in pretty realistic settings, I feel, like, you know, mountains and all the terrain and stuff. And like a sci-fi, I don't read too much like Dune or Ready Player One. If like humans dominated the space, the universe, that's what it's called. Or Ready Player One, it's a little more mild because it's like a video game with the prize, but like J.R.R. Tolkien and like super big sci-fi things, where does that fit in this history? Like, I read Sapiens back there, and it talked about a real life ancient human species that's now gone because we're all almost all one species, but they lived on a single island, and they were like a species of dwarves, like small. They didn't need height. They accommodated for the living, and they were like 3 or 4 feet tall, and like that's very real. And if someone hears about hobbits or something like that, and they find those bones from those past humans, they could be like, oh dang, there he is. And just assume that's him, that's a hobbit. Or like wizards, you can't signify what a wizard is by bones. You could look at a human skeleton and be like, oh, he was a wizard, or oh, she was a wizard. And like, oh, there's a whole village of wizards, and none's the wiser, you know? Or like kids' toys, maybe, you know? You'd be like, oh, there's a little wizard apprentice. This is another thing with fossils, like woolly mammoths or like saber-toothed tigers or literally anything in the ocean at all could be reconstructed with all, you know, their flesh and muscles and stuff to look like fantasy characters. Like, I've seen these memes. I'm very cool. I've seen these memes on Instagram where it's like the skull, alien, how an alien thinks they look, and then how they actually look. I'll put them here if I can find some. And there's one for like a pug, like a cat, probably one for like a horse or something, I don't know. So if they see these huge animals, they could be like, ew, that is a dragon. And they would have the like factual stuff as well, obviously, but they could be like, oh, they had similar bones. They had similar bones. Like they'd have to squeeze in excuses for themselves because it's all fact. So it's like, I guess these bones could either go to the real animal that we know about, or the fake animal that they don't know is fake. This is a very loose idea, okay? Do not make fun of it. And aside from books and photos and stuff and whatever, and drawings or, you know, all that, movies and film. It's caught on tape. What, aliens wouldn't know that we can do visual effects like Godzilla or King Kong or literally anything in the ocean. I don't like the ocean. Like Star Wars or something, like that's video evidence that we got that. So that's another thing. But moving on the sci-fi route with all the big spaceships and the colony-sized spaceships, and the flying cars, and all the time travel-y stuff, you know, will that be taken as fact as well? You know, Earth is destroyed if we take this from the timeline that I made up for this. What if some rich people flew off into space and escaped before these aliens could come and try and figure this all out, you know? So sci-fi, if given these aliens' reasonings, could also be technically real if you find some loopholes. Fantasy and sci-fi in film. I don't know how animated film would go, like the Disney princesses, or like Moana in, like, you know, Mother Nature. And for fantasy and sci-fi, and literally I guess any fictional book, the amount of world building really makes it real. Like historical fiction, obviously most of the world building you have to research, but like fantasy, that's all you. Sci-fi, that's all you, plus some research, so it sounds a little logical. But if your world building is deep enough and like full, that's super realistic. So it can get more and more confusing. How did you guys rule the entire world under like a terrible dictatorship, but also have a super awesome chrome-plated utopia of efficiency at the same time? And that brings into the question whether or not we'll actually fulfill any of these sort of utopias and dystopias in the future. So that brings into a whole nother thing, but we will not talk about that because that gets scary. And another point, another kind of book that could get a little confusing. Memoirs. If this extraterrestrial race came to realize that novels are fiction, and they came to realize that this sort of flowery writing, as compared to textbooks, is in fact not real accounts, then how would memoirs go? Because memoirs are a telling of a real life, but in a sort of flowery novel storytelling way. Would those be thrown into the fiction pile? Or would they know from, you know, context clues, or like a dictionary if they knew, you know, how that worked? Would they know that a memoir is an actual real account? Memoirs, are they real in aliens' brains, or are they not real after they learn that fiction is fiction? If they did not learn that fiction is fiction, then it would be real, and they'd get it right. They did it right this time. Good job. And I'm probably giving these aliens way too little credit. If they survived into some sort of homogenous society of intellectual genius, then good on them. And they probably know how to decipher human writing. But if not, and I'm gonna say if not, or else this video doesn't count for anything, then I'm gonna say that they like to make their own stories in their little, you know, languages and little societies, but they wouldn't know how we do it. That's how I'm gonna justify this. Like, if you give a group of aliens a non-fiction book and a fiction book translated into the language from our libraries, and you're like, okay, which one's real and which one's not? They'd be like, I don't know. I don't know, man. On the other way around, if an alien gave you a real book and a fiction book, and from their libraries translated into English, I'm assuming, because that's what I'm speaking, but whatever language you're best in, and you were told to figure out which one is real and not, you wouldn't know either. So, see, I'm discrediting humanity, and I am giving the aliens credit. So, yes. So this is pretty open-ended, and it gets worse as you try to justify it and legitimize it and make it logical. So I'm gonna leave it like it is. This isn't supposed to go anywhere. This is just my thoughts. This is what goes through my head every time I go to sit down, or every time that I add a piece of historical knowledge into my books, or add an event into my fantasy novels or something, I'm like, will this be accounted for in the timeline of humanity? Even though it's not real. If you have any thoughts like this while you're writing or reading or watching a movie or watching a weird video on YouTube, please tell me, because I don't want to feel like I'm in this alone. Thanks for watching me stumble through my thoughts. I did have notes here for me, but they helped, but it wasn't much. I'll hopefully see you again for Camp NaNoWriMo, and stay lit, stay epic, okay? I'm counting on you. Peace.